Good evening. My name is Carol Cadby, and I'm the teacher of the Performing Your Story class. Thank you for joining us for the first Theater Lab live stream. If you enjoy what you see tonight, we encourage you to share with friends, leave a comment, or like the video. The Theater Lab is currently enrolling students in our June-July online classes for adults. We're offering many scholarships to enable students who are financially impacted by the COVID crisis to take classes. For more information, please visit theaterlab.org or follow us at theaterlabdc on social media. This class, Performing Your Story, is being offered, and the first class is June 1st. Tonight, you are in for a treat. You will be seeing 8 of 16 stories in a Moth or a TED Talk style. These stories were generated over a 6-week period in a class that met 2.5 hours once a week. For most of these students, this is their first time telling their stories and definitely their first time on Zoom. These and the other stories will be posted on the Theater Lab website so you can check it out at a later time. These students have worked very hard to uncover, compose, and deliver their personal stories. This is not easy since they've had to find their passion, identify their authentic voice, and have the courage to share them with you. I am very proud and privileged to have worked with these individuals. And I'm also so excited to have them tell their stories for you tonight. So sit back and enjoy.
A red accordion has been in my heart for a long time, creating joy in me. And I'll tell you that story. When Roger, my father, died, the family gave to my girlfriend, Christine, his red accordion. However, a few months afterwards, Christine and myself, we split, and Christine kept the red accordion. It was a Honor red accordion with a white bellow, and on the right side it had a black and white keyboard, and on the left side, white pistons. Oh, it was a beautiful instrument. It was a gift my brother, my 2 sisters, and myself, we gave to my father when he turned 50 years old, 3 years before his death. Life went on. I met Violette, and we had 4 children. You know, I'm not a musician, but I really like music, don't you? I guess I like music because music was really part of my father's family. His music was rooted in French Canadian culture. He knew so many songs that were played in Quebec, in Canada for years, for centuries. I recall my father when it was New Year's Day with his red accordion, and he was singing with a wonderful smile. Samedi soir à Saint-Didon, il n'y avait pas grand-chose à faire. On s'est dit, on fait une danse. Let's dance at Bibi's place. We found a violin and accordion, a nice living room, and wonderful partners. Entrez, mesdames, entrez, messieurs. Please join the dance. You are welcome. And I see my father gigue, tapping happily on his feet with his 10 brothers and sisters and all the kids, including myself, swinging, dancing, and laughing. Oh, wow. That was really fun. I'm not a musician. You can hear this. But in my family, we really created a space for music. All our children at school, they learned flute, and when they were 12 years old, they put the flute in the drawer and shut it, and that was it. But our youngest child, Samuel, started to learn piano when he was 5 years old. But we didn't have any piano. So he started to practice his skills on, how do you call it? You know, that kind of flute piano, a melodica. So my wife, Violette, was holding the instrument and Samuel was blowing into it. And Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, poof. After 2 weeks, both of them, they were desperate. So a good friend lent us an electronic keyboard that we put on our dining room table. I mean, that was better, but it was not the best. So a few months afterwards, we bought an electric piano. Nice. And when Samuel turned 10 years old, he had his first upright piano. We finally got it right. Then Samuel learned classical music. Oh, I recall each year in June, my wife was organizing a concert at home. So neighbors came with their children, friends came with their kids, and they all sat in the living room and listened to Samuel playing Bach, Mozart, Ravel, Debussy, Shostakovich. And believe me, they were really pleased by Samuel's music and his warm presence. I need to tell you something. Um, my first girlfriend, Christine, and I, we kept friendly relations. So it means that her family, my family, we visited each other quite often. And Samuel turned 12 years old, and I see him at Christian Place playing the Beatles songs on her white piano. We all live in a yellow submarine. Oh, and we really were singing all together and having just a great time. And one day, to my surprise, Christine offered to Samuel my father's red accordion. Tiens, Samuel, c'est pour toi. It's for you. It's the red accordion of your grandpapa Roger. Oh, that gift, that moment. Oh, I mean, to see my son Samuel having in his arms the red accordion of my father. La vie est belle. Life is beautiful. Life is really beautiful. La vie est belle when you can live such moments. But Samuel didn't play on the red accordion. He kept on learning piano and became an excellent pianist. And then when he turned 18 years old, he went to Montreal to study music at university. But we lost the accordion in the move. Oh, I was not in a good mood. I was sad. I was mad. I mean, how come? How come it happens? Why are we moving always like this? But mes amis, my friends, 2 years later, when my wife Violette and I, we were coming back from overseas to Canada in our home in Quebec, what 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 did we see coming out of a box kept in storage? The red accordion. Oh well, that was great news. So we gave it back to Samuel, who was very pleased, but kept on studying, focusing, concentrating on his piano only. Okay, c'est comme ça. Okay, that's how it is. And then the following year, Samuel was 20 years old. He came to our place for my birthday. And then before dinner, he took out from his bag the red accordion. And then he started to play a tune on the accordion. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène, qui nous mène. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène en haut. It's the canoe that moves you, that takes you. It's the canoe that moves you up there. Then the magic came. I saw my father. I saw my father playing. Ha! I saw my father playing with Samuel. My father playing with the same joie de vivre enjoying life. And my son as well, my father living in Samuel. I was a happy man, and my son was a happy man. And we had this joie de vivre of my father. Mes amis, 5 years later, my wife and I, we visited Louisiana for the first time. Picture this. We are in Eunice at Savoie Accordion Factory. 20 Cajun musicians came in with their violins, their guitars, and their accordions. And I recall the last accordion player, he was a young métis, and he was testing for the first time his brand new Savoie accordion. And he sang, Laisse ton amour éparpillé, comme les aigrettes dans le marais. Let your love scatter, my friend, like the egrets in the marsh. And then I understood. I understood that the accordion can be part of the soul of people. I understood how resilient my father was, passing on with his music, with his red accordion, his culture. And my son, Samuel, kept that tradition alive. La vie est belle. Life is beautiful. Enjoy it. Thank you and take care.
My story is about growing and how wrestling with our problems can be a stimulation to our growth. That Sunday evening, I felt like a teenager coming home from school as I sat at that dinner table at my college friend's new home. But I wasn't a teenager. I was 28, deciding whether I should stay at a homeless shelter another night or ask to stay at their house. My answer may seem obvious to you, but it wasn't to me. I woke up that morning 2 years ago and I decided to put on the cleanest, chicest athletic shirt I had. I remember waking up early because all of my bunkmates would rush to the single mirror in the bathroom when the first wake up call was announced. I applied blush on my cheeks, combed my hair, applied mascara on my eyelashes, applied my teddy bear lipstick, and blow dried my hair. I looked exceedingly beautiful. I knew that after working at the gym for the next 8 hours, my makeup would completely fade away and I would look more natural and sane before dinner. My college friend and his wife alternated hosting Sunday dinners with our other friends from college every week. My friend texted me just as my shift ended and asked me if I needed a ride from work to dinner. I told him I was already on my way, but I wasn't. I was waiting for the next bus across the street from the gym I worked at, soaking wet in the rain. When I arrived at the dinner, my friends embraced me with smiles, hugs, and how are yous. They all contributed home cooked meals to the Sunday dinner. I didn't bring anything. I didn't want to buy something cheap from the value section of the grocery store. I was angry at myself that they already one upped me. But I needed to think of what I was going to say when they would ask me why I was living at a homeless shelter. So I pulled my best Dale Carnegie tactics and became genuinely interested in their success as managers and leaders in their companies. My friends were humble and detailed about their lives, which to me seemed easy. I figured they knew something that I didn't. All the books I read and all the ambition I had didn't match their ability to make the right choices, an ability I did not possess or I was questioning because my plans didn't unfold themselves as I would have hoped. I could not accept that I was not successful like them, so I would pretend I had no pain. I could not accept that I was falling short to of what I would like to be able to do, which was to thrive on my own. I was living in Virginia at this point. I had decided to move back in with my parents after my job as an aerospace engineer was terminated and I foreclosed on my home. 2 months before the Sunday dinner, frustrated with having my mom tell me what to do or show any power over me, I threatened her with hot water and a knife, called the police, and told them that I didn't feel safe with my parents anymore, and they took me away. The truth is, I didn't trust anyone, and I didn't feel safe anywhere. So I didn't stop my anger. I wanted it. The cop drove me to the community center. At the center home, I had my own room, daily group therapy sessions, warm meals every day, and one-on-ones with different therapists. I chose to be detailed about what was going on and what happened with them so they would understand and enlighten me with their superior knowledge of the mind. I learned voicing my pain to an open ear made my pain seem more manageable. However, their reasonable explanations of my behavior didn't seem to help me. I gave, but I did not receive. So I could not let go. They always focused on something irrelevant to me, so my therapy sessions with them became self-serving. The rotation of therapists during the day and every day seemed like a chess game. Sometimes they would offer me solutions to easy issues, and other times they would let me talk until my face turned blue. They were searching for my trigger, but no amount of wordplay could break me at that point. Once, my therapist was running late for a therapy session, so I waited outside their office until they were ready. Suddenly, I felt a cold liquid run down my neck all the way down to my pants. I swung around and pushed my attacker back. My attacker was a large woman and knocked me to the ground in one push and was ready to swing at me. I started kicking her as soon as I touched the ground. A therapist intervened before anything else could happen. I ended up in the office basement with another therapist, explaining the chain of events. I didn't know this person, but I had no choice but to trust her, which was very difficult for me. After an hour of me talking and her nodding, they sent me to bed. I was attacked, and all they did was offer me an extended talk show. So I decided to call the cops from their phone. It wasn't a surprise when they told me I was not allowed to stay at the center home anymore the next morning. They told me that there was a bed available at the homeless shelter. They called a taxi for me and sent me there. At the shelter, I was assigned a top bunk in a room with 10 bunk beds. Every Thursday night, they would hold a meeting, say a pledge, go over upcoming events, and then we would be assigned our chores. I spent the meetings judging my bunkmates for their lack of hygiene and some for their lack of purpose. I had a purpose because I was becoming independent of my family and I could survive on my own. I was oblivious to the fact I was living for free off of government taxpayer money. One night, my bunkmate, 2 bunks down, started calling me a nasty bitch when I decided to change my shirt at my bunk one morning. The bathroom stalls were completely full and there was no privacy. It was funny too, because the larger and louder ladies would walk around completely naked and the offended lady wouldn't utter a peep. I had a feeling her aggression towards me would escalate, so I knew it was time for a change of plans. The idea that the community center, shelter, therapists, and police were going to fix my problems completely faded away at this point. My assigned counselor at the shelter met with me once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes. After I got a job, half of my days were spent sitting on a bus going to and from my job as a front desk receptionist at a gym. My tasks involved folding apparel and wiping down gym equipment for $11 an hour. I wasn't working towards anything. My framework for decision making was based on my response to my perception of other people's power. So I asked myself, what do I want? I could not answer anything that I wanted in my life at that point, but I did know that I didn't want to be in the circumstances I was in then. Back at the Sunday dinner, I told my friends I had a fight with my family and decided to live in a homeless shelter. I decided to ask if I could stay with them at their home until I could get an engineering job. After that weekend, I moved in with my friend to my friend's home. And since then, I have regained my relationship with my mother, moved back to my parents' home, restarted my engineering career, defined my objectives, and now I'm telling you my story. I refuse to tell you that my experiences led to the success I have now. No one learns from trauma, and trauma is not a teacher. Having a vision alone, hoping and wishing and thinking positively never satisfied me. I had to decide what I wanted to do and start doing it to see it through. I'm giving you my story so you know the importance of growth and that it is not pain free. Your behavior does not dictate who you are. Who you are dictates your behavior. Your decisions will pave your way. So decide who you are with every decision you make.
Your destiny could be changed by a split moment decision. That was revealed to me when I spoke to my mom about her decision to leave her birthplace, the enchanted island of Puerto Rico, to come to New York. She said, "Let me take you to that day." So it was a Saturday, March 13th to be exact. My mom was a nurse at the Fajardo District Hospital, about 2 hours away from where her mother lived in San Juan. My mom would often go there on weekends to visit. On this particular day, there was a yellow padded envelope waiting for her. When she opened the envelope, there was a purple envelope inside and what looked to be the prettiest invitation. When she looked closer, it was a wedding invitation. But what she saw next puzzled her. Her name was listed as the bride, and George was listed as the groom. So George was this Moreno from New York who had studied at the University of Puerto Rico with my mom's younger sister Lali. The most that George and Milta had said to each other were adios and hola, but nothing more. She wasn't engaged to him. She wasn't even his girlfriend. Could this be some kind of mistake? Was he inviting me to my own wedding, she thought? After all, the last time that Milta saw George was 8 months ago. It was when she had visited New York to visit her cousin Delia. They went to the World's Fair, and there she bumped into George. Hola, George. He was there with his family members, and she just remembers that they were all talking so fast. And they started to laugh. And my mom didn't know if she had said something funny or if they were laughing at her accent. Nonetheless, she just thought they were so different. After all, George was the youngest of his 12 siblings. My mom was the second oldest of 12 siblings. George was African American, Milta was Puerto Rican, his native language was English, her native language was Spanish. He ate pork, she didn't. You know what I'm saying. So she looked at this invitation and she said, "This must be someone else." After all, my mom never wanted to get married. She was 29 years old and in those times considered an old maid. But that didn't bother her in the least. She made her own money and could go and come as she pleased. She wanted to travel the world and do it on her own terms. Plus, She saw how her mother was treated by my grandfather and step grandfather. From what I understand, my grandfather was a player. This man would have one woman after the next woman, and he made telenovelas look easy. And my step grandfather, he was a retired Korean soldier, and he knew how to be a person who did nothing all day. If you ever wanted to see somebody waste an entire day, he was your guy. I think he invented the word chillaxing. So the evening that my mom received this invitation, her stepfather came into her bedroom. She thought he was coming to talk to her about her decision, but instead, she spent the entire night trying to peel his hands away from her body. This good for nothing man was trying to have his way with my mother. The next morning, she woke up and told her mom about it, and my grandmother didn't seem to believe her. It was in this moment that my mom made a split moment decision and decided she wanted nothing to do with her household. She wanted something more. She dialed George. Jess, I will marry you. 4 days before her wedding, she arrived in New York. This felt like the strangest moment. Here she was on her wedding day that George completely planned, and she felt so strange. Her thoughts were talking so loud, she kept looking around, hoping that no one really heard them. She had borrowed her younger sister Lalene's wedding dress, jewelry, and shoes. In this moment, she was facing her truth and the lie of her arranged marriage. There she was, getting married in a Baptist church, yet she was very Catholic. All of her bridesmaids were George's siblings. And her only guest that day was her cousin Delia from the Bronx. The pastor said, "Say I do," and she did. And I want to tell you, this was the best decision of her life. My mom, Milta, and dad, George, were married for 53 years. Together, they raised 3 college-educated children. I'm the youngest of the 3, and they traveled the world. They remained together until death did its part and took my dad 2 years ago. My parents' marriage taught me that an invitation and a split moment decision could change the course of your life. Sometimes saying yes means saying goodbye to everything you know and having the courage to embrace the unknown.
Jocelyn, go.
So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'm part of the Bayhive. Now, you might be wondering, what is a Bayhive and what does this have to do with my story? So I won't keep you in suspense for long. The Bayhive is for the fans of the one and only Beyoncé, the singer. Now, for those who love her, we call her Queen Bey. And the reason why I really have felt very drawn to Beyoncé over the years is because she empowers and inspires us, especially women, and especially myself as a Black woman. I remember listening to Beyoncé, singing to her in the shower, enjoying her music, or crying in the car, and just really throughout my childhood, especially my adolescence and my young adult years, feeling like her music made me feel valid. And I believe a part of that validation truly came from not having it growing up. Um, Growing up, I dealt with a unique way of parenting. My first set of parents gave me up for adoption because of mental illness, and they weren't able to take care of me. So at 3 months old, I went into the foster care system. Fortunately, I was placed with a really good family, and they were a Caucasian family. They were very loving. It was a little dog and two parents. And my mom and dad at that time were very special. I still remember them singing to me at bedtime and giving me Oreos and warm milk. But that also ended in a way that I didn't expect. The mother, she died of a diabetic coma. And that left me alone with my foster father. He tried his best, but eventually he came to the conclusion that he couldn't raise me all by himself. So then I ended up going on a show called Wednesday's Child that promotes foster children who are up for adoption. I was very blessed again. And I found, or a family found me, in fact. And this was an African American family. And they took me in, and I became very close to my siblings. They had their own children, and my adoptive mother and my adoptive father. More so my father. I was a real daddy's girl. And so it came to pass that my adoptive father, he passed shortly after I turned 18. So in hindsight, I realized that going through those transitions, it was a question of who did I identify with and who am I? And even though I was blessed on that journey, it left a real void for me feeling validated, especially from men and seeking that attention. So right after my father passed, I ended up getting into this relationship, and it was quite toxic after the honeymoon phase. So that's what I want to focus on. And I chose a song of Beyonce's because she is an artist that I can really relate to, that helped me get through such hard times. She's going to help me get through my story today. I'm using her song When I Was a Boy. So in this song, she talks about how she was mistreated by a man and how she would get revenge. That was her takeaway. If she were a boy, she would get him back, and she would do all the things that, he did to her. And it's a cool song. I like it. But what I decided to do was take the premise of it, of being mistreated, and talk about how when I was a girl, I looked for validation from men. But, unlike her story where it ends and she's crying in tears because she's a girl and she can't ever be that way with him in real life. I've decided, although I cry long and hard, I persevered and I got up. And I understand that validation comes from within, not a man, not a woman, but from yourself. So please enjoy my musical parody of Beyonce's song, When I Was a Girl. This is my version that I self-created. I'm sorry, her song, When I Was a Boy. And this is my version of my self-created song, When I Was a Girl. So this is my story as a young girl. This is my story as a woman. You, me, us. When I was a girl, I had childish ways. Roll out of bed in the morning, thinking about boys all day. Drink shots with the guys and chase it with beer. Hey, bartender, over here. Looking for validation. Behind makeup, I had a real fear. Would they see the real me? When I was a girl,
I didn't quite understand my full worth or my value. I swear now I'm a better woman. I listen to me, 'cause in me I see the young girl that I once was, who was taken for granted for being young and naive. When I was a girl, I would blow up his phone, would spend all night crying, waiting for him to come home. I put him first, 'cause my standards were low. Faithful and loyal, 'cause I was scared of being alone. Hello? What do you mean you're not coming home? I'm done. I swear now I'm a better woman. I listen to me, 'cause in me I see the young girl that I once was taken for granted for being young and naive. I don't have to be a boy to prove that I am the bigger person. I appreciate that. If you thought I would play games with you, you thought wrong. When I was a girl, I didn't quite understand my full worth or my value, looking for it in a man. Now I listen to me, 'cause in me I see that I'm a grown woman and I put too much work in. I have to trust and believe in me.
Though I was a bookworm as a kid and discovered much of the world through reading, it was my father, a lowly waiter with an eighth grade education, who gave me my true compass to life. I was a voracious reader and grew up priding myself on becoming educated. I read everything I could get my hands on, and I saw the world through authors like Dostoevsky and Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Harper Lee and Langston Hughes. And it was through them I was able to transcend the confines of the segregated world in which I found myself in Hampton, Virginia. My daddy, on the other hand, was not well educated, and I wished he had been. He left school in the eighth grade at age 14 to work as a sharecropper. Born in 1905, he had 9 brothers and sisters, 7 stepbrothers and sisters, and 4 half brothers and sisters. Eventually, he made his way to the city, to Newport News, where he worked in the hospitality industry. He was a waiter at fine resorts and dining establishments around the state. He served wealthy white people at places where he could never stay and never dine. Even though we did not have much money, my daddy always managed to have a big car, always a Chrysler New Yorker. And one of his greatest joys was to take our family on vacation. Daddy was so proud. Now you have to understand that Black families in my neighborhood in the 1960s did not go on vacation. My younger sister and brother, we get excited and we would pack the car with suitcases, pillows, blankets, my brother's baby crib, thermos jugs, coolers, and ice chest, while my mother, a registered nurse, would pack the home cooked fried chicken and potato salad and coleslaw and sweet iced tea. With the car packed, we would head out to see the world. I would sit on the front seat between my mother and my father, and I would read the maps and direct Daddy on the route. This was a big responsibility because I had to keep us from getting lost. There was no GPS, just me, the map, and the destination. Since my father had an amazing network of family and friends, we went many places. We would leave Hampton, Virginia, and drive to DC. And we'd spend time with my mother's sister, Fanny, my Aunt Fanny, and her husband, Uncle Clarence. And then we drive around DC to see the monuments. And I recognized the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the places I had read about. Wow. And then to one of the best places of all, Chicago, Illinois, where my mother's sister Celestine and my father's two brothers, Arthur and Cyrus, lived. I saw Lake Michigan, and we went downtown to Marshall Fields. I learned about the Loop and the L train. One time when I was about 14, Daddy told me he had a surprise. He wanted me to be the navigator of our route from Detroit to Canada, another country. I figured it all out, the distances in kilometers, the road signs, the gas in liters. We were in Toronto. What a beautiful, clean city. And then on to Niagara Falls, one of the seven wonders of the world. I had never seen anything like it. But the real surprise, we stayed in a hotel. All of these trips, all of these years, we'd never been to a hotel. In fact, as I recall later, my father would often pull over into a rest stop and sleep for several hours when he was tired. I did not know then what I know now, which is that for the most part, Black people did not stay in hotels. They were off limits, but not in Canada. We walked into the lobby and someone took our bags and they unpacked all of that stuff that was in the trunk. They waited on us. They served us. I had always seen Black people as waiters, and now I was being served. This is what it feels like to be served. There were chandeliers and velvet curtains, and we ordered room service, just like in the movies. I felt like a princess. When I grew up, I continued to learn from books and became a citizen of the world. But I owe so much of my education about what is important in life to the time I spent with a man who had an eighth grade education. I learned what it means to be part of a family, both immediate and extended, the importance of being both a gracious host and guessed that there's always room and time for family and friends, and the thrill of exploration of going where you've never been before. But the most valuable lesson I learned from my daddy was that I could overcome the challenges of being Black in a racist society, and I deserved equal treatment. I learned what it feels like to be a princess and to be rich when you don't have a dime, and to know the joy of love and laughter. These are the things you cannot learn in a book. They are the things I learned on our family vacations. Thank you.
I've used to never believe that our ancestors would talk to us. I didn't think that they could hear us or communicate. Until I started working on the stories about my Italian ancestors. Then I discovered things, peculiar things. It was the day I was writing a chapter about my grandmother. Now, my grandmother herself was an engaging storyteller. She mingled real life with anecdotes and stories. She always conveyed a lesson. It was like a little fable. That afternoon, I took a pen in hand and I started writing the story, and something else came out, another story. It seems like what I wanted to written, what I wanted to write was different than wanted to be written. And it was a fully formed story about my grandparents' marriage, the day they married, and full with sensory perception, even thoughts, everything, dialogue. I wrote it down. But when I finished, I needed confirmation, so I called my sister and I said, "Look what happened to me!" And she was saying, "No, no, 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 no. That's not true. You must write the truth. So trash that. Don't do anything with that, and write something that is true." So I was thinking, but I felt my grandmother next to me. I feel like she was dictating this to me, and she's like, no, she wouldn't have it. And so I hang up the phone and I turn to the portrait of my grandmother and say, "Grandma, please help me here. If this story is true, I want you to give me a sign, and not just a sign, like not just any sign, like a big sign, something really, really you." And so I felt this strange energy, and I put on my jacket. I went out for a walk. I walk past the neighborhood, and then I found myself in front of a forest. Now I didn't know that there was a forest around my home. So, but it was compelling. I went in. It was like my legs moved, and then I walked even more deep. I was deep inside the forest when I glanced at my phone and I realized 5% charge, and nobody knew where I was. And it was getting dark. And I turned back, and as I was going up a hill, I saw this beautiful emerald glowing light in the forest. And it was like a bubble of green, like an orb, and so enchanting that I had to take my phone out and make a picture. And I took a picture, and then I saw more orbs floating, and 3% charge. And this was getting spooky, and nobody knew where I was. So then I kept walking, trying to find my way out, and then I felt somebody was looking at me. I felt like somebody was maybe kind of like felt in the back of my head. I felt this like the goosebumps, the stare. And I turned to see, and I saw this white, ghostly face of an animal deep in the forest. Now, I took my phone, 1% charge, and I was fascinated and scared. What is this? And this thing was like alive, looking at me. And as I moved closer, I realized it was a beautiful white deer. It was a fawn looking at me, scared at me. And so I was like, took my phone and snapped the picture. Or I thought, because the phone went blank. So I finally managed to arrive home. It was dark. And my husband was worried about me, and he was like, "What happened?" And I told the story, and you have to understand, he's a little bit skeptical, but a whole lot of nerdy. So he knows all these facts. He says white deers are very rare in Virginia. They only appear in Wisconsin. And I said, what about the green light? And he's like, it's only a reflection of the camera. So I was, well, embarrassed, because by the time my phone had charged up, I was believing him and disbelieving myself. And I was so embarrassed about making this fuss about this magical thing that was happening to me and my grandmother. But then I turned off the camera and I look at my phone, and there they were. So I had a sign, I had asked for a sign, and I got a sign. Better than that, I had actually inhabited one of my grandmother's tales or fables. And I had a picture to prove it. My grandmother used to say, life is full of magic. But most importantly, the universe loves to delight us. And believe in yourself. And the moment you least expect it, you will be taken to enchanted places. And I remember that. And now she was right. Because today, this is what I have to say. Yes, ancestors talk to us. And yes, it was about time I started to believe in myself.
Why are you glaring at me? I'm not. Why are you giving the interns assignments? My supervisor asked me to find something for them to do, and I wasn't giving them anything substantive. You don't have the capacity to determine what is substantive. Sound familiar? You may not have heard these exact comments, but whether it's mean-spirited comments, demeaning gossip, isolation from colleagues, or even physical intimidation, most of us have experienced workplace bullying at some point in our lives. It can be particularly painful because we spend most of our waking hours at work. According to the Workplace Bullying Institute, workplace bullying can have a severe negative impact on your emotional health, your physical health, and your self-esteem. According to the Institute, 80% of people who have gone through traumatic workplace experiences have suffered from anxiety. 52% have had a panic attack. 49% have had clinical depression, whether new or exacerbated. And 30% have shown symptoms of PTSD. I've experienced workplace bullying firsthand. I would walk in the office door and immediately get this feeling of dread and anxiety. I would then sit in my office doing my work, and as people came by, they would speak to each and every person in the adjacent offices by name and then intentionally not speak to me. It was done in a manner so that I knew that I was being isolated. I've experienced these type of experiences for years in a few environments, and it's had a major impact on my emotional health. I used to have an easy, shy, relaxed smile, but I became tense and despondent. Due to the trauma, I was walking around like with a blank stare, just totally shell shocked. I became so anxious that I would regularly stammer my words when I was trying to make a point. I was always on guard and would commonly glance around in a nervous way, trying to determine what people think of me. I'm still trying to get over that. And often I would try to get my words out, but words would come out that just didn't make sense. Workplace bullying also has a major impact on physical health. According to the Workplace Bullying Institute, it causes body pain and tension, cardiovascular problems, skin problems, gastrointestinal problems, and it weakens your immune system. When I was going through workplace bullying incidents, it impacted my health deeply. I would get tense in the neck and shoulders, so it's up. I was practically walking around like this, and I had so much neck and shoulder pain. I would get sick often as the stress and the trauma exacerbated my asthma. So I would have long bouts of both uncontrolled asthma as well as bronchitis, which would linger often for months. In addition, workplace bullying has a major impact on self-esteem. Victims often suffer from imposter syndrome. Psychology today defines imposter syndrome as a phenomenon in which well-accomplished people believe that they are undeserving of their achievements, that they aren't as competent and intelligent as others might think, or that they're a fraud, and that eventually they'll be found out, even though their accomplishments are indeed legitimate and well-earned. I definitely suffered from imposter syndrome and am still working my way through it in some ways. At my worst, I would downplay my accomplishments. I wouldn't tell people that I had a law degree. I wouldn't tell people that I graduated from an elite T14 law school. I wouldn't tell them I was a licensed attorney or that I've been licensed for a decade and a half. Wouldn't tell them my age, that I'm 43, because I was so afraid that that would increase the expectations of me and I wouldn't be able to live up to it. I would be really knowledgeable about a subject, but I would be so nervous and unsure of myself that as a result of my natural shyness from childhood through early adulthood, and then exacerbated by the workplace bullying. Thus, others would assume that I didn't know what I was talking about. And they would roll their eyes at one another and snicker while I was talking, as by this point, I was usually stammering to trying to get my point out. The trauma from workplace bullying has a long-lasting impact, even after you escape that job. Similar to other abusive relationships, it can follow you from job to job until you truly seek healing. For me, the trauma personally affected personal friendships and relationships. I became extremely sensitive to criticism, and I was already sensitive. and it caused me not to trust others for fear of rejection. However, there's good news. I am a living testimony that you can overcome the trauma from workplace bullying. But with lots of hard work, time, therapy, self-care methods such as meditation and yoga, while I'm still a work in progress, I have definitely moved from surviving to thriving. My hope in telling my story is that no one would have to go through this again. If you're experiencing workplace bullying, tell someone. If you witness it, let the victim know that they're not alone. Remember, there's no such thing as remaining neutral when you witness workplace bullying. To be silent is to be complicit. Are you complicit? A few years ago, I wrote a song about my experiences. So I'm performing it now that my confidence has grown. In the D.C, it's as hard as can be. I'm not talking about the streets, but the political scene, where cats are straight ruthless on their quest for the most. Mean-spirited bullies get a kick out of destroying folks.
Last winter, I started taking ice skating lessons at my local rink. Now, I hadn't been ice skating since my grandpa used to take me as a little girl, and it showed. But never mind. Me, when I wobbled out onto the ice, I felt just like a princess. My little princess is what my grandpa used to call me. Mi princesita. It takes me right back to when my mom used to drop me off at my grandma and grandpa's on her way to work. My grandpa and I had a game where we'd sit on the floor and roll out a layer of pink Play-Doh. I'd take a giant cookie cutter in the shape of a penny and I'd stamp down and he would wipe away the excess. Then we'd take my pennies and put them in the bank and he'd help me count how many I had. When I had 10 pennies, we'd go shopping in the kitchen and we'd buy a glass of milk and 2 cookies. And he would help me count out how many pennies I owed and how many pennies I had left. That's how come when I went to Head Start at the age of 3, I already knew how to add and subtract. The irony of this is that when my grandpa landed on the shores of America in 1924, he did not speak any English, nor did he read or write. Often, my grandpa would sit me on his lap and tell me stories about his childhood in Ecuador. I was enchanted by how he had escaped from the mean nuns at the orphanage in the mountains, how his father was a tall colonel in the Spanish army with squinting blue eyes and a blonde mustache. His mother was an Incan princess with long black hair braided down her back. When she died in childbirth, the colonel was so sad that he left his newborn son in the care of the nuns. Now, Grandpa escaped from those nuns, and he was just 14. He went in search of the fabled city by the sea over the mountains. He walked for many days and many nights through a dark, scary forest. One day, a big black mountain lion trapped him high up in the tree. And for 3 whole days, my grandpa couldn't eat or sleep or drink because the lion was waiting down below to eat him up. Well, finally, my grandpa shook his strong fists and beat them against his chest, and he let out a mighty roar. And the mountain lion got so scared that he ran away. When my grandfather reached the edge of the forest, he looked down the mountain, and there it was, Guayaquil, the fabled city by the sea. Grandpa had never seen the ocean before, and there were boats, bigger than he ever imagined possible. Grandpa went to explore on one of these boats, and that's how he ended up as a stowaway. When, about 3 months later, he walked off the gangway onto the shores of Manhattan, it was wintertime, and my grandpa was wearing the only thing he owned, a pea coat that had been given to him by a crew member. They had taken up a collection and put $11 in his pocket. It was a fortune. I've often wondered if my grandpa stood in bread lines that winter, if he sheltered in church basements. He never said, but I do know that he eventually got a job at a shipyard in Manhattan where he helped build ships. He married my grandma, who was an immigrant from Spain, and they moved to a tiny little tenement in the Bronx, where they eventually had 2 children, my mother and my uncle. That was the apartment where one day my grandpa would take care of me. My grandpa never quite loved the winters in New York. He resisted. His blood seemed to resist the need to thicken. But he also hated to be cramped inside. So he would often take me ice skating. Ice skating, the joy of ice skating, helped me forget the pain of my mother's violence at home. And when I was 7 years old, my grandpa bought me a pair of white ice skates. They had shoelaces with pink pom-poms that made me feel just like a princess. I had a pink knit hat and a matching pink scarf and matching pink mittens, and my grandpa would hold me tight before letting me go on the ice. Ten cuidado, mi princesita, he would call as I glided out of reach. My grandpa was the joy of my life, and I wish things could have stayed that way. But when my mother died in March of 1986, my grandfather and I were estranged and hadn't spoken for many years. I have a vivid memory of him bending over my mother's coffin at her funeral and keening. Mi alma, he sobbed, my daughter, my soul. Though he was overcome by grief, I did not go to comfort him. The rift happened one day when my mother and I had a knockdown, drag-out fight. Over what? I don't remember. I was 16 and way past the age when she could beat me with impunity. We were in the kitchen, screaming at the top of our lungs, when suddenly she slapped me across the face. It stung, and my eyes immediately filled with tears. But instead of swallowing them down as usual, I let out a primal scream, and I slapped her right back, hard. It had been a long time coming. My grandfather ran into the kitchen, and at first he just looked completely shocked. And then his expression turned to anger, and he glared at me. And then that anger turned to disgust. And then he turned away. I was devastated. I felt so betrayed, so deeply hurt. What I realized in that moment was that I was, in fact, princess number 2. That though he loved me deeply, my grandfather's loyalties were with his daughter, my mother. He simply couldn't accept that I had hit her, though she had been hitting me my whole life. In his mind, that show of disrespect simply wasn't allowed. My grandpa died died the year after my mother. He died of a cerebral embolism, but everybody said he died of a broken heart. By that point, our relationship had long been irreparable, and I was so bitter I did not go to his funeral. So last winter, when I decided that I'm going to go learn how to ice skate again. I wobble onto the ice, looking like the Michelin Man, wearing 3 bulky layers and a pink crash helmet. I'm also wearing knee pads and elbow pads and wrist guards and even a tailbone protector that looks like an oversized diaper. But no matter. When I glide out onto that ice, or wobble is a better word, I feel just like a princess. I imagine I'm wearing a pink skating costume with sleeves that flutter in the breeze as I gain speed. I close my eyes and I see my grandpa standing at the edge of the rink, his eyes glinting with pride. I can feel his tender, fierce love, and I know that he is keeping me safe. Now, 25 years later, I can appreciate the wonderful things about my grandpa. And I'm deeply grateful that he helped shape me into the woman I am today. Look at me, Grandpa, I whisper, my heart filled with joy. Look, I'm still your princess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.